Hello everybody, I'm here. This is the third video that I've made back to back because we have some shorter chapters moving along in this book. And my last video was about 8 minutes long or so. So we just finished with that one. That was chapter 10. And that was, I believe, an angelic conference where Ilariel takes us through how the souls were chosen to incarnate around the same time as Jesus. And now we're going to read about the two Marys in chapter 11, and that is obviously Mary's mother and Mary Magdalene, who we now understand as Jeshua's counterpart, his divine feminine, making it a whole. And this is a pretty short chapter as well. The two Marys. Joanna, please tell us about the contrast between Mariana and Mary Magdalene, and we're still speaking to Ilariel. That contrast was very marked. They were both experienced initiates and empowered women, but their characters were very different. Mariana was a person of quiet and calm authority. There was a great sense of clarity about her, and her dedication to the light, capital L, shone forth in everything she did. She acted as the spiritual anchor and foundation for the group of first circle female disciples, being well qualified to do so, as she had been a high initiate since the days of Akhenaten in Egypt. She was one of the brightest jewels in the main Egyptian mystery school of that time, and achieved a balance and spiritual empowerment that made her the ideal leader for the first circle of female disciples. Some people mistook the quietness of Mary's manner for docility or weakness, but when they looked into her eyes, they saw a quality of steely and unmovable determination that surprised them. A few might be foolish enough to start arguing with Mariana, but that look of determination made them change their minds very quickly. When you look into the eyes of a being that steady, that integrated, and that dedicated, you know all argument is useless. When she led the meetings of female disciples, Mariana would start off the discussion, but from that point on would say very little. She let everyone have their say and express themselves fully. And only, I live very close to a prison, and that's their time when they count the inmates from being out of doors or out of their cells. I know, it's a horrible reminder. I hate it. But if it goes off 3 times in a row, that means they can't find somebody. So we have to, I guess, lock our doors, because I live blocks away from a very well-known prison, and it's a medical facility at that. So I think there's mental issues on top of it. So it's sad. It is. It's so weird to think that such a close distance from me, these people live totally different and isolated lives. Okay, and only when a matter had been thoroughly discussed would she round this off with a balanced and moderate summary, which acted as a fair consensus for the whole group. Comment by Stuart. The impression one gets from reading the biblical account is that Mother Mary was overtaken by events that she neither expected nor could fully understand. And there is also the sense of Mary arriving at that point confused and somewhat unprepared. However, this information from Ilariel gives a very different picture. Here, Mary is seen working towards this vital time through the attainment of high levels of consciousness within the main Egyptian mystery school. As Akhenaten lived some 1,300 years before Jeshua was born, and Mary was a high initiate at that time, we begin to glimpse a master soul of great inner strength and enduring dedication to the light. And it was light, symbolized by the sun's disk, that formed a central focus of Akhenaten's vision of the universe. And in the Christ letters, Jesus does explain that when he was younger, his mother didn't initially understand or agree or accept the Messiah that he was going to be. She initially thought he would be the Messiah for Judaism. And when it became clear that that was not the case, that he had a totally different message and a totally different ministry to teach, it took her a moment to come around to that, because she was raised in the traditional Judaic religion. So she did come around, but only when he was younger and he was challenging the people in the synagogue. He was challenging the leaders. Were they a bit leery? Is this really what he's to do? Is this really God's plan for him? And they decided to go along with that. So I want to say from maybe his teen years on, there was more of a remembrance, acceptance, and even obviously contributing greatly to his ministry. Okay, let's see here. The session continues. Alarial. Mary Magdalene had a very different temperament. Powerful, eager, enthusiastic. The fire of her total commitment to the light burned within her like a bright flame. She was a passionate advocate for truth and justice, but in her zeal might occasionally overstate the case, something that Mariana would never do. If Mariana's empowerment expressed itself in her poise and her restraint, Mary Magdalene's empowerment manifested in a confident and joyful outpouring of her energy and her love. Peter, who had trouble dealing with any empowered woman and who had real difficulty with Helena Salome, had problems with Mary Magdalene from the very beginning. Her free and powerful expression of opinion, which might have seemed frank, open, and engaging in a man, grated upon Peter's patriarchal nerves. Whilst he would never dare to question Mariana, one look from those eyes would have silenced him. Questioning and indeed criticizing Mary Magdalene was something that Peter did often. Comment by Stuart. For some more information on Peter's difficulties with Helena Salome, see Bloodline of the Holy Grail by Lawrence Gardner, and that's in page 102. We're not far from that. The session continues. Alarial. He deeply resented her closeness to Jeshua and wished to promote the interests of the male disciples and diminish the importance of the women. He could not bear the thought that Jeshua could be telling Mary Magdalene things that he, the obvious leader in his eyes at least, of the male disciples, needed to know. Above all, Peter could not accept the basic structure through which the way would be spread. That after Jeshua left them, the teachings would be given out in two ways. The outer teachings, which would spread by most of the male disciples, led by Peter, who was to be the rock, the foundation of this new movement, whilst the inner teachings, the inner mysteries of the way, would be taught by John, James, Thomas, and Philip, this group being led by Mary Magdalene. Mary, trained in the initiatory mystery schools of Egypt, was thoroughly familiar with this pattern of teaching because it was a method much used in mystery schools throughout the region. She saw the two teaching arms as mutually supportive because the outer group would be open and public and would deflect attention away from the inner, which in any case needed a quieter environment to do the subtle work along the esoteric and Gnostic lines. In her view of things, the most advanced followers of the way would naturally gravitate over time from the outer to the inner group, and this would give the whole movement a fluidity, a pattern of development, and a richness of potential experience that one level alone could never provide. When, after the crucifixion, James and Mary tried to explain this two-part plan to Peter, he brushed it off at once as impractical. He saw the followers of Jeshua as an embattled army and regarded any kind of division as a splitting and weakening of their forces. Besides, Peter could not tolerate the idea of a rival leader, and a rival leader who happened to be a woman was quite unthinkable for him. He saw this move by James and Mary Magdalene as an attempt to weaken his leadership, and he simply would not tolerate it. In taking this position, Peter began the rift between the mainstream teaching of the way, which in time became the Catholic and Orthodox churches, and its Gnostic counterpart. This led to the final persecution and elimination of all Gnostics as heretics, a persecution which paradoxically was carried out by the very part of the movement, the outer church, which had been designed to nourish and protect it. Thus, the clash of personalities between Peter and Mary Magdalene had profound implications for the development of Christianity, implications whose effects are felt right up to the present day. Although the outer aspect of the way might develop as it did along religious lines and become a church, the inner aspect was never truly a church, but rather a spiritual movement of free kindred souls. A movement in which spirituality and not religion was the principal focus and driving force. As Islam has the Sufi movement and Judaism has the mystical Kabbalah, so Christianity should have had its own mystical and Gnostic core. Very interesting. And the loss of this core has left it with a permanent wound from which spiritually it is never recovered. That is very true. I've never looked at it like that. Joanna, why didn't Jeshua make it clear that there would be this twofold structure? Ilarial, because he knew that Peter would have the greatest difficulty in accepting the key role of Mary Magdalene, and would probably have tried to isolate Mary and bar her from the inner group around Jeshua. Jeshua wished them to move towards the time of the crucifixion in as united a way as they could manage, and hoped that the shock of the traumatic events at that time would bring Peter to his senses so that he could accept a larger role for Mary Magdalene. Had this happened, and had Peter and Mary gone forward united, the history of the West might have been very different, and the leadership role of women within Christianity might have been accepted from the beginning. Joanna, and was Christianity very damaged by this split which started at the time of Mary and Peter? Ilarial. Yes, damaged so deeply that it could not fulfill its purpose as Jeshua had planned. Without its balancing mystery school counterpart, the church is like a clock with some of its mechanism missing. In a sense, you have not really experienced Christianity yet, only the incomplete fragment that history has handed down to you. Please don't go into judgment about this. That incomplete fragment has helped and inspired countless people since its foundation, but it could have been infinitely more effective as a way of treading the spiritual path that leads to the light, capital L. A balanced system is always to be preferred to an imbalanced system, and only a balanced system can help human beings realize their full potential. Comment by Stuart. When one realizes that the split between progressive and traditional elements was present from the very beginning of the Christian story, it makes the later pattern of development much easier to understand. What is interesting here is the way the clash of personalities, conventional, patriarchal Peter and outspoken, progressive Mary Magdalene, sets the wheels of history in motion in a certain direction. Sadly, the early pioneers of Christianity who came after Peter and Mary were unable to correct this initial divergence, and the split, which might only have been a temporary incident, became instead the general trend that resulted in the destruction of the Gnostic movement. There's literally one word all the way at the top up here to finish that sentence. Okay, the session continues. Joanna, was the balance between the outer church and the inner mystery school practical and energetic or symbolic? Ilarial, it was both. The balance between the outer church and the inner mystery school was designed to provide a practical and effective system of spiritual development, but it was also a reflection of the essential nature of the universe. The outer church represents Father God, and also the sun, knowledge, structure, ritual, and form. The inner mystery school represents Mother Goddess, and also the moon, wisdom, flow, process, and life. Neither is complete without the other, and together they manifest the wholeness of the way. The true Gnostics were not only knowers of the truth, they were knowers of the way. Within them, knowledge and wisdom, structure and flow, ritual and process merged into oneness, as the masculine and feminine energies are blended into the ultimate wholeness of being. Here, all the balancing energies merge into the totality of the human experience. This was what Christianity was designed to lead towards. This was the balanced path of spiritual development which Jeshua worked to establish upon the earth. And this, sadly, was what was rejected in favor of a one-sided presentation that valued the form but rejected the life. Is it too late now to heal the rift, to embrace both the form and the life within a twofold balanced system of church and mystery school? Will masculine structure acknowledge the importance of feminine wisdom? And will the heir of Mary Magdalene stand forth to balance the heir of Peter? And that's an heir like H-E-I-R, like an heir to a fortune. We shall see. And that is all from Ilarial. All right. So we're going to stop right there. And in chapter 12, we're going to read about Jeshua and Mary Magdalene. And that is a short video. Some of these are quite short, just being a few pages long. So I hope that's okay that I share some shorter videos mixed in there with the longer ones. So until I see you again, take care of yourself and take care of those around you. And I love you all so much. And I will see you again soon for chapter 12. Bye-bye.